the fruits of her labor, along with Bart Worden, who's been working side by side with her, and both of them have been such valuable partners with me on the committee this past year. Let me just say a few things about the committee before I turn things over to them. The mission of the AU Membership Committee, the membership and membership committee technically refers to membership of new societies, of new groups becoming members of the American Ethical Union. But part of helping groups get ready to be societies is to help develop new groups who want to become societies. And once societies are admitted, we work to help grow and develop existing societies. And there are some new programs we're working on coming down the pike that you are likely to hear about later when the Assembly of Business gets underway in earnest. So I'm just delighted to be here and so pleased to introduce to you our two speakers tonight. You probably have seen the cycling through of the bios already. We have lengthy bios, you can see. I'll just kind of give a couple of highlights for our two speakers. Bart Worden is our Executive Director, American Ethical Union. He's clergy leader of the Ethical Culture Society of Westchester. He has worked for and with the AEU for decades. He has a history of working in community behavioral health.
That's my computer.
As well as doing great work on addressing bias and discrimination in Westchester County, where he makes his home. He earned a bachelor's degree in the philosophy of religion from Hope College, a master's in social work from NYU, and is a graduate of the Humanist Studies program. Joan Johnson Lewis has been an ethical culture leader for 30 years. She's served societies in Riverdale, Yonkers, Brooklyn, Northern Virginia, and Chicago, and has been an interim executive director of the AEU. She currently serves on the AEU Membership Committee and Board Development Committees, and is president and leader representative to National Ethical Service. So I think my step now is to turn things over to Bart and Jone.
Okay, so we can get started. The workshop tonight, maybe better called the membership journey, of how a member takes their journey through membership. I also want to say something about managing time. We've got a lot to cover and not as much time as we would love to have. And so if you add that together, when we do participation, I really want you to do short answers and headlines. And you don't need to explain a lot. Most of the people here will have some common experience with you. And so that will help us work together. What I'd also suggest is that if you want to build some networks between us and you're willing, you can share your email address in chat and everybody's able to save chat. And then people can follow up with you if they were curious about something that you were saying. So you can do that now if you want, or later. Okay, so at the very end, we're going to include a link to a downloadable handout, which will summarize all the key points and include some usable worksheets that you can take back to your society and proceed from where the workshop ends to making an actual plan. So let's begin. Let's start with how are we doing? Many of you filled out the survey that we sent to you by email, and thank you for doing that. So we're going to do a quick review of that. We asked you to do a quick assessment of where you think your society's capabilities will be as you come back from the pandemic, where your strengths and weaknesses are in the kinds of activities that can help a society to grow. And it would be rare if you have a 5 in all of these. Mega churches have multiple staff people working for them to do all of this really well. The point with an ethical society for most of us is to do a few really well and do at least something mediocre or above about at least half of them. So Bart is going to share the results of the survey while I share the descriptions. how well are we doing at providing information about our society in places that reach people who are most likely to be interested in membership? And I'm going to call a 4 or a 5 a strength, and a 3 is mediocre in the original meaning of mediocre, which means moderate but not very good. And a 4 or 5 is a weakness.
1 or 2. 1 or 2 is a
sorry,
weakness.
1 or 2 is a weakness. So how are we doing on providing information where people can find it?
Yeah, so if you look at this first slide, you can see that the majority of folks are at the meh or lower, and a few are saying things are pretty good there.
Okay. And how about providing activities that touch, inspire, and include people who might be interested in membership?
Yeah, stronger showing on the positive end there for sure, with 8 respondents in the 4 or 5s, but also 8 in the middle pack there.
And help current members inform their friends and acquaintances about the society.
Yeah, not so strong on that end. We have 6 well below the 3 and 10 right in that low middle.
And identify newcomers, visitors, and inquirers, and then keep track of them and follow up.
Yeah, also it looks like that's not a strong point, with 9 below the 3 and 6 in the low mid. But there's a few that seem to have a strong showing there.
And help visitors and new members quickly become part of the community and get their needs met.
Yeah, stronger showing there with 6 above the 3 and 8 again. We have strong middle on just about all of our slides.
Help visitors make a decision about whether to become members.
Yeah, well, that's strong middle. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Celebrate and honor the occasion when a new member joins.
Stronger showing on that end, right? With 7 above the 3 and 6 striking up the middle there.
And help new members understand our values around membership.
Yeah,
That's
really,
an interesting graph.
yeah. Like I say, it's all the way across the board, but the strong showing is 12, 2/3 basically saying, we're in the low middles.
Yeah. Provide activities and programs that involve current adult members so that they can grow and learn.
Well, another strong middle, but a little bit stronger on the positive side than the last one, certainly.
Okay. So how about provide activities and programs that help children meet their needs for ethical growth and learning?
Yeah, this is an unusual one for us because the middle is almost empty. And then there's a strong showing with 8 societies, 8 representatives saying the good things, and then 9 on the lower end. So it's very mixed.
Yeah. And my guess is that means that the societies which have any programs are pretty strong. And then there are some societies which have no or a struggling program. Provide activities and programs that involve current adult members to help them contribute to a more ethical world. So this is ethical action.
Yeah, definitely the strongest showing of all so far anyway, with 8 above the fold and just 5 in the middle.
So provide activities and programs that help children with ethical action.
Yeah, another difficulty here with the strongest being 1s, 6 of them. So that's an area of need.
How about help current members celebrate joys and get through tough times?
Again, stronger. It's kind of like the programming one, right? With a strong middle and then a pretty strong 4s and 5s.
Yeah. Help members reevaluate and renew their commitment from time to time.
Yeah, a little bit on the, again, low middle, and then 6 societies below the middle point.
Yeah. Yeah, only a couple strengths there. Keep track of and in touch with members who are distant temporarily.
Even less positive than the last one with 10 below the fold.
Yeah. It's easy to forget people when they're not there for a while.
Yeah.
Keep track of members who reduce attendance or pledges and follow up with them.
Looks kind of like the other graph. Yeah, so
Yeah.
9 below and there's 7 in the middle.
Which often means they're either in personal crisis or they're upset about something that happened at the society. So it's a good time to follow up. Help members connect elsewhere, maybe another ethical society or another kind of organization that would fit them better when they decide to leave your ethical society.
Yeah, I get the feeling we don't like to see people go away. 11 below the fold and 4 in the middle.
Okay, so those are key areas for you to test yourself on at your society occasionally. And that list will be in the handout that we have at the end. So what I'd like you to do right now is think of one thing you do in your society on any of these that you think is particularly strong, and type it into chat. And that will allow you to people to go back and find what others have shared. And if you're willing to have someone contact you about that, you might attach your email address or phone number to the message. So just something that your society does on one of these that you think is a strength. Okay. So if you're weak on something and somebody's strong, you can maybe contact somebody afterwards and ask about it a bit. Okay, as we finish up the typing, I want to invite you to a time for reflection. Consider your own membership journey. Some of you are newer, some of you have been around a long time. Imagine the first time you heard or read about an ethical society. Try and get that in your mind. And then imagine your first visit to an ethical society. Why did you decide to go? How did you make that decision? And then what did you first get involved with at the society? And when did you first feel included as part of the community? And what made you decide to formally join? So I'd like to ask a couple of you to name one thing you remembered as you were thinking about this journey. Again, just the headlines, and raise your hand. We'll have time for 3 or 4 of you to mention something that you remembered when you were thinking about your own early membership journey. Anyone? I'm not seeing hands raised. Rebecca.
In terms of the first time I heard or read, I was having an ethical dilemma in my work at the time, gone on for years, and I just Googled ethical dilemmas and ethical issues, came up with ethical culture and went, and it wasn't anything that I was looking for in that regards. I thought maybe it would just be a
Okay.
place I could talk about it, so.
Okay,
Was
thank you. Stan. I'm going to
Keep the
move
mute.
to John while we let Stan unmute.
What I remember is that all the folks who had joined over like a 6-month period or 8-month period were all invited to a big old party and really celebrated our new membership.
Okay, so Stan, you're unmuted now, so go ahead.
Yeah, you'd think I'd know better, but I first got involved maybe 5, 6 years ago when I went into the Philadelphia Ethical Society, the building, to attend another function. It had nothing to do with, they just happened to meet there.
Okay,
And so I picked up their brochure and I went to the Next Sunday platform, and I was been hooked since.
okay. So remember, everybody, to be short, just the headlines. And the Waltons have their hand up collectively.
We remember seeing a article in the Chicago Tribune, which to our knowledge, we have never seen anything else like this for any other organization. And we decided to check out the place. And we met 2 people who said, welcome, and were given big hugs. One of those people,
Okay,
I will celebrate his 88th birthday tomorrow.
okay. So Klaus and Linda, we have your hands up if you can be really quick.
Friends of mine invited us to a winter solstice party. And then years later, I found out a book group that nothing followed, and about a book group that our society had, and I joined that.
Okay, Linda?
I started attending colloquy. And I
Uh-huh.
found that was very a chance to get to know
Okay.
other members.
So as we think and hear about everybody's journey, that helps give us ideas about what would attract other people. So I'm going to ask you to do another imagination. What have you been involved in since joining that met your needs for community and for ethical growth and learning? Just think about that. And if if you're not brand new, what have you been involved in helping the Ethical Society to actually function? What has the membership in the society inspired you to do in your personal life? And what has your membership in the society inspired you to do in the wider world? And we have time for 2 or 3 of you to share. So if you'd raise your hand. Paula?
Discussions based on Arthur Dobrin's book, Ethics for Everyone.
Okay, Bill?
One of the things that the Ethical Society has given me is the skills to be able to speak up against injustice or other things that are going on a personal level, on a one-to-one level. So it's given me that skills and that confidence to do that.
Okay, and Stan?
Probably the biggest impact of my membership is being more anti-racist than I have been since before I was a member.
Okay. So it gives you a sense of what being a part of an ethical society means to people. I would suggest that when we think about why do we want membership growth, that our answer to that largely shapes whether the society will grow or not. So think first silently, what is your answer to that? And I'm not going to call on you, just let you keep that to yourself. So one of the answers to the survey was, I have joined our society because of 3 things: social justice, personal growth, and community. You know, if your reason for wanting membership growth is some variation on there are lots of people out there who need an ethical society. And if people are joining your ethical society because they see the impact your society makes on the world, you are most likely to see membership growth. If you want membership growth primarily because you need people to run your committees or increase pledges, if that's your primary reason, you're probably not going to grow. Now, those latter things are real issues that we face and need to solve. And some of the material may touch on those a bit. But for people who want to find out more about those kind of issues, there's a couple of other modules in the lay leadership training that would help. There's a 10 systems lay leadership module that helps figure out what structure of the society works best for your size. And there's also a unit called What Do We Really Know About Membership Growth, which will answer some of the questions that some of you expressed in your surveys. And Bart's going to post a link to the web page where you can request one of those classes for yourself or for the society. It is a good reminder that membership growth has several different lenses to look through to become really good at it. And so tonight we're going to look at two interrelated models that can help you get started. So what we're going to do for the next part of this workshop is this. We're going to switch from thinking about your own experience and apply your imagination and empathy to imagine what the experience is like for other people. So we're asking us to think about who are our members of the society, past, present, and future. So who are the members of our society? It's true that every person in your society is unique. And each person's characteristics, needs, and actions are unique. And it's also true that each of the people in your society shares some common characteristics, needs, and actions with some other members and not with other members. That is, there are subgroups in your society who share some needs and characteristics and actions more than they share it with other people. So we're going to talk about subgroups in your society, and healthy societies have multiple subgroups of people. Now, it's harder to think about subgroups when you're under 20 people, but it's also crucial to thinking about how to grow. What subgroups of your society, let me ask that differently. What subgroups of your society have different needs as persons that they are trying to meet by being part of your community? What subgroups do you have now? So think of 2 or 3 subgroups within your society that exist. And then think about what subgroups in your geographic area are underrepresented at your society right now. And your geographic area is wherever you're currently drawing from. You know, if you've got people who drive an hour, new people might be willing to drive an hour. And then think about, where do you want to grow? There are 3 basic options for growth when we think about it in terms of subgroups. One is we can expand an existing subgroup. We can attract more people like that. And in fact, that's the natural way that most groups work, that they attract people who are like the people who are already there. Or we can attract more of a variation on a current subgroup. So for instance, if you have lots of parents of children under 5, you might want to get better at serving parents of older children. Or you might want to attract a subgroup that is currently underrepresented at your society compared to what it is in the demographics of your area. So what I'd like to do now is have you pick a subgroup where you want more members. Just in your mind, pick a subgroup where you would like to have your society have more members. Again, it could be more of the same, a variation, or a group that's not currently very much there. So what do they have in common? And think this through with me. What are their demographics? So somebody calls it also psychographics, like, you know, not believing in God is a psychographic more than a demographic. What brings people to the society? What are their needs? What are their pain points? What are the pains in their life that bring them to a society? And then what keeps them at the society? What needs are being met, and what pain or pleasure points are being triggered for them? So some examples of subgroups I could give you from the, one of them might be parents of young children. And you might even have separate subgroups for single parents, two-parent families, queer families. What about them? You know, they're usually ages 25 to 45 about. They want some help with their children, learning ethical values. Maybe they don't have the support of their family of origin in what they think are ethical values. So those are some of the things we might think of with parents of young children who are attracted to the society. Another traditional subgroup we've attracted in ethical culture are the interreligious couples. And these could be from 20s through 80s. And so demographically, these are people where the two people in the couple are from different religious backgrounds. Their families are religious, but their need is a place where both of those faiths are equally respected. Even if they're not taught, they want a place where they're not judged. So that's part of what we would think about when we think of these subgroups. So what do most of those people do if they're part of your society? And we're talking here about behaviors and actions, not thoughts or ideas. So again, the subgroup parents of young children, one of the behaviors that they would have is they often sit with their children the first few times they visit, and they don't even come to the platform. Or sometimes they leave the adult platform in the middle of it to deal with an issue with their child, or just to see how they're doing. That would be more typical of parents of young children than some other people. From many of the conversations I've heard and observations I've made, if we look at a subgroup of people of color, a behavior in early visits is people look around to see if they're the only one. They look for signs that they're represented in pictures, that issues they're interested in are important to the society. And remember that people of color is not one subgroup usually. You know, Black, Dominicans, Haitians, couples, singles, older, LGBTQ, there's all kinds of dimensions there. Another thing for what people do at my age, I begin to assess when I go a place how many stairs I'm going to have to climb, or if there are alternatives. And sometimes the needs are in tension. Parents want kids who will run around and enjoy themselves and be given some freedom. But what happens if they're around older adults who are unsure or unable about movement? And do kids make noise, and that interferes with those who are hard of hearing? So sometimes these needs are in tension. Okay. So let's think about these people that we've got in mind, these subgroups. And what we want to do for this exercise is personify that subgroup as a representative person. And so this helps in, if we can get a mental picture of a single person, it helps humanize the group. When we're looking at how to communicate with them, we can think of, oh, I'm writing this social media post to George. It helps in planning programs, and it helps in supporting. So, you know, I might have a subgroup that's single mothers of young children. Oops, I went ahead too fast. my mental picture, and it may fill in more, you may have more demographics to put in, but I'm really getting a picture when I think of a young single mom of a young professional who works in Manhattan, lives in Riverdale. Her ex is not in the picture. Her parents are supportive, but they live in California. She has a busy life. She wants some company for her child. She wouldn't mind some supportive friends too. So that's kind of the picture I'm getting of this subgroup. And I'm going to give her a name. I'm going to call her Maria, so I can talk about Maria. So we're going to have you work on this. What I want you to do is come up with a very basic description, no more than 7 words, of a subgroup. And now we're going to show you a Post-it board where you're going to post them. And Bart will get that online while I finish explaining what you're going to do with it. What will happen is you're going to get a link in the chat to click on. And that will bring you to a board where you will be able to post Post-it notes with everybody else. Add no more than 3 subgroups. You can add up to 3 subgroups, and I see lots of you are coming in now. And then we'll combine similar notes and move them around. So let's kind of quickly go. If you click, I've already got a couple there. If you click on the board, you should be able to bring up a note and then type in it.
And you might try double clicking if clicking once doesn't do it for you.
And if you're on top of somebody else's, that's okay. You can just move it around.
Yep. And to get the text in, just click inside the box. Yeah, I see you're doing. Never mind.
Okay, so we have college students. And here's one that's a little too small to read. Person interested in social action. I'm going to move that over closer to anti-racism work. It's not quite the same. And we've got Hispanic families. And Bart, if you can help me move some of this around so we get similar ones near each other. And whoever put up younger members, you want to be a little more specific about an age range there. Okay, we got a couple of college students. Anyone under 40.
See, seniors who live
Okay.
alone is right next to stressed out graduate students. I imagine they have a lot in common, but
They're not really the same.
yeah.
And we did our vote. So what you're going to be doing in your breakout rooms on these 6 topics, and you'll get to choose which you go to, is fill out what's called a persona grid. And I'm going to explain this. It's brainstorming mode this time. If you're actually doing this in your society, you would take an hour or so to go through this. You want to, this is the core of what's in the grid. You're going to write a few demographic and psychographic details. What identifies this person in more detail? What are some of their needs and pain points? And what are some behaviors and actions that characterize this group? And then give it a name. Like I gave my group the name Maria. And if somebody's really computer adept, you'll be able to figure out how to even find a picture for it. So, but don't worry about that. That's not something you need to do. So, you know, as you go to your rooms, you're going to try and fill this out. You'll see Post-it notes are already there that you can click on for each one. Remember that everyone in your group has something to contribute, so be sure everyone's heard. And if there is a time when you have completely opposite views on something, just try to understand each other. You're not coming to consensus here. You're just brainstorming.
Jone, should I put them all in the chat?
Yeah, so Bart is going to put all the Hispanic families group. If you could give us the name of your persona and describe that persona briefly.
Oh, I'm horrible with picking names, so I just picked Hispanics. But I'm sure it could be better.
That's okay. This is a brainstorm mode.
Yeah.
And in real life, you would do research.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're declining, I'm hearing. And so let's go with group 2. And I can't remember which one that is.
Okay, hold on. Group 2 is, oops.
Parents of young people, of young children.
Parents of young people, of young children. And if you could describe the name and a few things about that persona.
And I'll share my screen now.
About the persona and some characteristics of it.
So we named them Jackie, a parent of young children, and said that they are professional. They may have just moved to a new place and are looking for a setting for their child and for themselves. They might want a classroom for their child to go to during a platform and have different accommodations for kids, like healthy snacks available. And they may want a lot of communication coming from the program to build a trust relationship.
Okay, so that gives us a start on this. And if you were really doing this at your society, you would take maybe a 2-hour meeting to really go into this and maybe have done some research as well. How about the people who are ready for activism? Do you want to report? Does somebody from that group want to make a quick report? What was your name?
Howdy, do you want to do it? You're so much better at this than me.
Sure. Sorry, I have to go back to the board because I don't remember everything that we wrote.
I think I can pull it now, finally.
It's just loading. So basically we looked at, I think it's called Agents of Change. The demographics were people willing to go to the streets and to take part in projects, people wanting to get involved in activism and who want to work behind the scenes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Our needs and pain points, sorry, I'm going this out of order. Let me see, the behaviors and actions, proactive, engage with causes, people who are willing to protest and to organize. And needs and pain points was they need to see change, they need to feel useful, oppressed by the larger culture and that have experienced injustice.
Okay. And the one suggestion I'd have, because, you know, the idea of personas has been really well tested in a lot of settings, is to give a name so that you can personalize that person. So that when you're thinking of writing a social media post, you can get that person in your head of who you're writing to. When you're thinking of a program, what does so-and-so want to go to?
We
So
were
we're gonna
dwelling with
move-
that as the timer, the counter was going
Yeah,
down.
right. So that's just a suggestion when you do this with your society or your
You know,
team.
that concept worries me a little bit. There's something about naming an agent of change and like we're locking in on things that are culturally relevant. And there's just something about that concept that makes me feel really uncomfortable, like somebody's gonna engage in something that's gonna feel oppressive to somebody else just with the name they pick.
Okay. I would just say that as long as you remember to hold that name loosely, and when you're working with it, it makes it much more like you are talking to a real person when you have a name. When you are able to abstract it, you are often not as targeted for the materials that you develop. And just hold it loosely and remember the negatives that are possible with it, and that you want to make sure that you're not limiting yourself. So let's move on from that and talk about, again, how do we relate the subgroups to our societies? In a society, it's helpful to have about 3 to 5 groups that you're consciously trying to include in your work, and maybe 1 or 2 of which you're actively working on changing in a current year. And there are also lots more. In a large society, you might be dividing this work, like your Ethics for Children program may be working on one group, your Ethical Action Committee may be working on another. So the next step in this process, once you have the idea of what the demographics are that you're looking for, is we're going to look at it with a slightly different lens and then come back to the subgroups. So we can think of membership growth as being about getting people in the front door of the society, but it's also about keeping them in the room so that they don't leave by the back door. Losing people has as much effect on membership growth as not finding somebody. And it actually may have the same numerical effect, but it has more emotional impact when you lose people. So part of membership growth is how do you keep people? So here is one way to look at the membership journey. And this is developed from a variety of very successful congregations that have used similar models. And I tried to pull together the ones that seem to be most useful in ethical culture. The first step for a member is they discover that your group even exists. Maybe they had never even heard of ethical culture before. How do they take that step on the journey of knowing you exist? What happens at that step? Then some people who go through that step will come to a first event. What do they find at that first event? What is the society doing that will help them feel comfortable at that first event? And then we hope some of those people attend a second event. Old research said about 1 in 3 who attend a first event will attend a second event. That may actually be a little higher in some places if you have really good information, for instance, on your website, because they've already done some selection already. You won't get the person like once asked me at an ethical society, so I've been here 3 times. When are you going to use the Lord's Prayer? And had to gently say, I think you need to check out this other place down the street. Then the next step is people explore. You know, people don't go from attending a second event to deciding to join. They explore. They test you to see if you're really who you say you are, and if the community is a good fit for them. Some people who go through that stage will go through a stage we call affiliating. And affiliating is not really about joining. It's about feeling part of the community. And most people don't join until after they feel like they're part of the community. Now, occasionally you'll get a visitor who wants to join on the first visit. My experience with that is that 90% of them don't last more than a month after that, unless they're coming from another ethical society. So the affiliation stage is really important. How do I feel like this is my home now? And then there's a step where they actually decide to become a member. They want to join. And then there's a step where they go deeper. That's where people decide, okay, I might take on chairing a committee or being a committee member. I might take on being part of the board. I might organize an ethical action committee, or I might organize something with other progressive congregations in the area. That's what going deeper means. So I want you to think for a minute. I asked you earlier to remember your first experience. What's one or two things about what I just want to ask a few of you to say, what's one thing about your first experience that made you decide to visit a second time? What's one thing that made you decide to visit a second time? And I'm not, okay, Jan?
The opening statement of what the Ethical Society was just clicked with me right off.
Okay, okay. So it kind of told you who they were, and probably you hung around a bit making sure that they really were that kind of group. Tachi?
How warmly welcome my child and I were the first time we were there, and that we were invited to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that inviting somebody to come back, that's, I hope I see you next week, can make a huge difference. Diane?
I will echo what Tachi had to say. And similarly, when we came back the next weeks, we were recognized, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Rich, one more, and then we'll move on.
It was a group that had a different demographic. It wasn't my normal group. And I said, wow, this is a way to expand my horizon.
Okay. So I'm also going to ask you, thinking about your first time, and maybe hear from somebody we haven't heard from before, what almost made you decide to not come back in your first visit? What made you almost decide not to come back in your first visit?
Hank has a finger up.
Hank?
It was a lousy platform.
Yeah, so a lousy talk that week.
Okay.
That might totally move somebody off this track. And I want to add those arrows too, because it's important to remember that people can move off the track and disappear. Anybody else have something that almost didn't come back? John? John?
Unmute, please, John.
I noticed that everyone was either my age, mostly everyone was my age or older, but I came back anyway.
Okay. Jesse?
Almost too few members, but not quite.
Okay. Yeah, that's a harder one to fix quickly, but it is a turnoff for some people if it's too small. It's also a turnoff sometimes that there's too many. So that will really vary. I know we had a big open house for Sunday school parents 2 years ago, and we had 30 families show up, and we obviously didn't have room to accommodate them all, and about half of them we didn't see again. So sometimes it can be too much. Okay, so when we think about subgroups this way, we sometimes can come up with how we need to vary our approach to reach that subgroup. And some of their needs are a little different than the people who are already there. So for instance, you know, somebody who's 80, who's coming for the first time, you know, one of the things they're looking for on the first visit is, can they hear everything? You know, they might be looking for intellectual soundness. Somebody who's coming, who's 25, may look around and say, you know, is anybody else my age here? What music are they playing? Are they playing that music that sounds like it's an old folks home, as one of my millennial friends calls my favorite music, folk music? A little sobering to think about that what the music you play does have an effect. Sometimes people don't come back the second time because they hated the music. So what you want to do once you have those subgroups is take them through this membership journey with your team that you're working with. We're not going to go through this together or in subgroups, but you really want to go through this in some detail on your team with the subgroups. In other words, pick your subgroup and say, what is different about these stages? And especially if it's a subgroup that you're not currently reaching, then there's probably something that you're not doing right now that is turning people off, or they're not even bothering to come. So in the handout, you will get a brainstorming sheet to go through this, to look at all the stages for each of those subgroups that you're working on. And again, remember, you only really want to work on 1 to 2 a year for change, because you can't absorb enough change to have 5 new subgroups at once. You might get lucky and they come anyway, but to be deliberate. And I'm not sure if you can read this all that well, but along the left-hand side are the stages. And then there's 3 columns to fill in. And the first one is, what are their likely feelings and needs at that stage? You know, when somebody doesn't even know you at all, what do they need to know? What are they looking for? And then what steps might you take to make that a good experience? You know, what kind of ad would really appeal to the Hispanic family? What kind of ad would really appeal to young people? What kind of conversation that somebody might have with them? And then also brainstorm what might move them, once they've discovered it, to moving to the next step, which is the first visit. And so you go through this with your team and list at least 2 to 3 concrete actions in brainstorming mode. For instance, for Maria, that single mom with the young children, she's attending her first event. And what actions might the society take? One is greet the family warmly. Tachi, thank you for that cue. That's extremely important, especially with families. Make a name tag for both the mom and the child so that they feel like they're part of the group. Show them to the Ethics for Children room personally. Introduce them to a teacher or the director. Maybe give them a packet of written materials about the society that Maria can take home, because she's focused on her child on that first visit mostly. She's not focused on listening and retaining everything you tell her. And if Maria comes back to the meeting room after going to the children's room, make sure somebody talks to her about her, not about themselves. So those might be some first steps you'd take in that first visit with Maria. So that's the membership journey. And this is, and that guide should help you through it. What I want to say is here. There we go. So in your handout, you have this repeated too. What are you going to do with what you've learned here? If you think it might be useful, if there are some subgroups you'd like to attract more of, you need to think about who will need to support you in doing this at your society. Who will you team up with to actually do the work? What strengths and opportunities in your society can you leverage to do this? What are likely objections and how might you address them? How will you find out what you don't know? For instance, if you're a team trying to attract more Hispanic families because you're in a neighborhood with lots of Hispanic families, but your team doesn't include any Hispanic families, how are you going to figure out what you don't know? And then determine when you're going to start. Your plan can be pretty simple. You brainstorm, you set the priorities among the brainstorming. And the chart that I gave you earlier is a way to brainstorm. Which of those actions are you actually going to do this year? And then set some time frames. What will you do this next month? What will you do in 3 months? What will you do in 6 months? What will you do in a year? And in the handout that you get, and Bart is right now going to put a link to that in the chat. And I think we're going to try mailing that. If you got a reminder about the meeting, we should be able to also send you a link to the handout there.
I will do that.
Great. So it's time for harvesting, which is trying to figure out what has developed here. I'd love to hear from just a few of you in this last 5 minutes, something that you're taking home from this. And again, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. There's something you're taking home from this. And I can't see if you're waving in Windows, so.
Rebecca
Rebecca?
has her hand up. Yeah.
Be more focused instead of just saying we're going to try to grow, figure out how to focus.
Yeah. Stan?
More or less an echo of that, the methodology and how to focus in on a group something that's workable and structured.
Right, that's what I was going to say. We need to set a strategy, and that strategy needs to have some timetables with commitments with timetables.
Right. And Norma?
Unmute, please.
Am I okay now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, just thank you so much, Joan and Bart. It was a wonderful evening. I think for me, it's a motivation factor to take all of this information and somehow put it into an actionable format where it's meaningful in our society, but the motivation to do it, I think, is a little bit stronger now, thanks to you both.
Great, thank you. And I would say, one of the things I mentioned was, who can support you in this. Remember that you can talk outside your society too, and make some inquiries about, are there other societies that have been successful in that demographic? And maybe include that in your research. We can all be supportive of each other in that. Our societies wouldn't exist at all if we weren't successful, at least with some of the subgroups that we have. Any more sharings before we end?
Hank has his finger up.
Okay,
Please unmute.
Hank.
What I think is missing is that you get members of the group together to state what they want and maybe to help organize. My first step in joining Wes was sitting around someone below 30, sitting around with 3 other members below 30 and deciding to form a young adults group. Sitting
Right.
around over a Scrabble game.
Yeah. When you have people in the target group, it's helpful to have them there in the planning and the implementation. But one of the reasons that you're trying to expand to a new group sometimes is because you don't have people there, or the people you have are really exhausted. Like, I would not ask in the next 3 months a parent of 2 young children to be part of this planning process. What I would do is have a couple phone calls with them to, at their convenience, to pick their brains on whether we're on the right track. Because right now, with Zoom coming out and school coming back, young parents of young children are probably one of the most stressed groups in our culture. And the same goes with people of color, that you don't necessarily want to do that work unless you don't want to necessarily ask somebody to join if you haven't already done some work to show that you really mean it. Okay. But yeah, include the people you're targeting somehow in your research. One of the things I would mention as we close, Liz Collier, about 7 years ago now, I think it is, wrote a really good paper on attracting millennials. And there's a lot in that is still valid 7 years later, as all the millennials have gotten 7 years older. Okay, any last words from anyone?
Don't forget to fill out the survey.
Don't forget to fill out the survey. You want to put another link in the chat to that? Is
Just
it there
did.
again? Great.
Just did. And Rebecca has her hand up.
Okay.
I can see how that I could save the chat, but I don't know where it gets saved to. Does anybody have any idea what happens?
It'll save
It
to a
says-
folder on your hard drive. And
Yeah.
you
Just
get it'll show you when you close out, you'll see
Yeah.
it's in the documents folder typically.
Yeah.
Okay, and does it get saved as chat? Because mine just said use your finder for it, and I don't know what to look for.
I think
Yeah.
it's called chat.txt.
Okay,
TXT.
great.
I know that's on Windows at least.
Yeah.
And you may get a message blinking at you, and you can click right there on the link in that window and then look where it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jone and Bart.
Thank you
Everyone
all.
for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you, Jone and Bart especially, and good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night,
you,
folks.
John
See you at the
Bart.
next one.
Bye. Thanks so much.